The envelope arrived in the middle of dinner, slid onto the table by a courier who looked far too formal for our noisy, uncomfortable family gathering. It was cream-colored, heavy, and stamped with the Swiss return address. I had barely touched it when my father's hand shot across the table and pulled it away from me, as if I had reached for something dangerous. He laughed awkwardly and said it was nothing important, just boring paperwork. My stepmother tilted her head and smiled in that patronizing way she always used with me, the way adults smile at children who ask too many questions. My mother nodded in agreement and told me everything had already been handled, that I should relax and be grateful. In that moment, I didn't yet understand how much had already been handled behind my back. My name is Sophia, and I was 27 years old when I learned that the people who raised me were perfectly capable of lying to my face if money was involved. My parents divorced when I was 15, and within 2 years, both of them had remarried and built new families that never quite had room for me. My father married Linda, who brought her 2 children, Kyle and Megan, into his life. My mother married Richard, who had a daughter named Ashley. Overnight, I went from being an only child to being a background character in 2 blended families where I never fully belonged. I learned quickly how to stay quiet, how to take up as little space as possible, and how to accept that I was no one's priority anymore. The only place I ever felt truly seen was with my grandmother, my father's mother, who lived in Switzerland. She didn't have a lavish lifestyle, but she lived comfortably, surrounded by art, books, and routines she loved. Every summer, I stayed with her for weeks at a time. We walked through old streets, spoke French together, visited museums, and sat for hours while she told me stories about her life. She taught me patience, curiosity, and self-respect. My step-siblings barely knew her existence, and my parents seemed far more interested in discussing her finances than her health as she grew older. To them, she was in a state waiting to be settled. To me, she was home. When my grandmother passed away, the grief felt unbearable. While I mourned, my parents immediately shifted into what they called logistics mode. They talked about documents, accounts, and distributions with a cold efficiency that made my stomach turn. 6 weeks after the funeral, my father invited me to a meeting to discuss what he called family estate matters. He said it would be simple and private. What he didn't tell me was that everyone would be there, both my parents, both step-parents, and all 3 step-siblings, sitting around a polished table like a board of directors. The meeting felt stiff and rehearsed. My father cleared his throat and announced that my grandmother's estate had been finalized. He explained that because our family structure was now complicated, they had decided to divide things fairly. My mother chimed in, claiming my grandmother would have wanted everyone taken care of. I felt my confusion rise into panic. Everyone? My stepmother smiled and said family was family and fairness mattered more than technicalities. Then my father slid a piece of paper toward me. According to their plan, each of us children would receive $50,000. I stared at the number, feeling as if the room had tilted. My grandmother had left everything to me. At least that's what she had told me more than once. She barely knew my step-siblings. When I questioned it, my mother accused me of being selfish and reminded me that others had needs too. My stepfather casually mentioned using their portion for Ashley's graduate school, while my father spoke proudly about helping Kyle start a business. That word, portion, echoed in my head. She wasn't their mother. They had no portion. But my father shut me down coldly, reminding me that he and my mother were the executors and that they made the decision they felt was right. Then the letter arrived. When my father snatched it away, something inside me snapped. That letter was addressed to me. When I stood up to take it back, he ordered me to sit down. And then, in a moment of careless arrogance, Megan whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear that she couldn't believe I didn't know they had already emptied the Swiss account. Silence fell over the table like a weight. My father denied everything immediately, but his face betrayed him. I knew then that something had gone terribly wrong. The next day, I called him and demanded answers. He dismissed my concerns, claimed there was no Swiss account, and said everything had been handled through the U.S. estate. When I asked to see the documents, he told me I wouldn't understand them anyway. Later, I learned from a cousin that there had been multiple estate meetings I was never invited to. My exclusion wasn't accidental, it was deliberate. Things became even more surreal at my grandmother's memorial service. I walked into the room and saw framed photos of her with my step-siblings, taken recently and clearly staged. My grandmother barely tolerated them. During the service, my father gave a speech claiming she loved all her grandchildren equally. I felt physically sick listening to the lie. Afterward, I overheard Kyle bragging about buying a car with his inheritance. When I confronted him, he shrugged and said family was family. My father walked away without saying a word. The turning point came with a phone call from Switzerland. My grandmother's neighbor called to express condolences and asked whether I had received my grandmother's personal letter. I hadn't. She had mailed it weeks earlier. That night, I went to my father's house and searched his study. I found the letter, already opened and resealed. Inside was a short note in my grandmother's handwriting warning me not to let them take what was mine and assuring me that the bank knew her wishes. When I confronted my parents, they stopped pretending. They claimed my grandmother was confused, that they were doing what was best for everyone, and that they deserved compensation for raising me. My father admitted they had redirected funds as co-executors and insisted it was legal. That was the moment I decided to stop trusting their version of events. Using the account number from the letter, I contacted the Swiss bank. They couldn't give details over the phone, but when I explained my concerns, they advised me to come in person. I booked a flight to Zurich on my credit card and told my parents I needed space. They seemed relieved, assuming I was backing down. In Zurich, I met my grandmother's long-term attorney. He showed me everything. The Swiss account had been set up for me when I turned 18 as an irrevocable trust. It required my biometric identification. My parents had no legal access. When they attempted to transfer the funds using forged documents, the bank froze the account and documented everything. The balance was over $2 million, untouched and protected. My grandmother had anticipated everything. She had recorded a video will, explaining her choices and warning me that my parents might try to interfere. Watching her speak from the screen broke me, but it also gave me strength. She believed in me when no one else did. When I returned home, I called another family meeting. This time, I came prepared. I laid the documents on the table and told them exactly what I knew. The room fell apart instantly. My father denied, then deflected, then finally went silent. I showed them the video. There was no arguing with my grandmother's voice. I didn't take revenge. I didn't press criminal charges, though I could have. I reclaimed what was mine and walked away. I forced my parents to return the excessive fees they had taken from the U.S. estate and donated the money to charity in my grandmother's name. Today, my life is quiet and stable. I paid off my debts, built a career, and surrounded myself with people who respect me. I no longer chase approval from those who only saw me as an obstacle. If you've ever felt like your family valued what you had more than who you are, know this: protecting yourself is not selfish. Sometimes love means walking away.